Squid Game, the series that captivated the world, revealing the darkest aspects of human nature. Desperate people drowning in debt are forced to participate in a game for a massive cash prize. But could the deadly games in Squid Game be inspired by a story eerily close to reality? In the 1980s in South Korea, hundreds of people disappeared on an island. Both children and adults were forcibly taken, subjected to abuse, and condemned to inhumane conditions. This real-life event bears chilling similarities to the fictional world of Squid Game. So, does Squid Game actually reference this dark past? How deep is the connection between the real events and the series' story? Get ready to explore this unsettling tale where fiction and reality intertwine. We investigated whether Squid Game has ties to real-life events, and what we found was a very dark story. As you know, in Squid Game, 456 players were brought together, all sharing a common trait: financial struggles and overwhelming debts. They competed in children's games on an island to win money for the entertainment of the wealthy, but losing the game meant losing their lives, a grim reality they were unaware of when they joined. In the series, only one person could outlast the rest to claim the grand prize of 45 billion won, equivalent to approximately $30 million. However, in the real-life story we uncovered, there were no games, only torture and death. Kim Jung was a highly intelligent and curious child living in a small house by the river with his family in a rural village of South Korea in the early 1980s. Despite his young age, he was deeply interested in everything around him, reading books and filled with a great desire to learn. Unlike the other children in the village, Jung had a strong passion for reading and discovering new things. As a result, he often spent time either at the village school with his teacher or at home near his elders. However, life in the village wasn't always peaceful and safe. With South Korea's rapid industrialization, villages gradually became dependent on larger cities. Jung's family faced financial struggles and eventually moved to the city in hopes of building a better life. As his mother was ill, Jung helped his family as much as he could. One evening in 1982, Jung left his home during the late hours. Later that night, two police officers approached him and asked why he was outside and if something was wrong. Jung explained that he had to work to support his family. The officers told him that for his safety, he needed to come with them to the police station. Being just 12 years old, Jung naturally trusted the police officers, believing they genuinely cared about his well-being. During the 1980s, child abductions were alarmingly common in South Korea. Children would disappear suddenly, and their families would never hear from them again. Jung's trust in the officers would become a decision he would regret for the rest of his life. Let's hear from Ms. Lee to delve deeper into the events. In 1983, Ms. Lee, who was just 7 years old, was wandering the city with her brother when police officers approached them. The officers asked them the same questions they had asked Jung, and then took them to the police station. At the station, they assured them, "We will take you to your family now." But waiting outside was a white van. The government's police were slowly abducting their own people. After gathering information about individuals at the station, they would kidnap them. What awaited in the van was horrifying. Up until this point, the events mirrored the premise of Squid Game. In the series, people struggling financially or wandering aimlessly were deceived and gathered into vans. Similarly, in real life, people were loaded into vans, and the interior was eerily similar. When the van doors opened, you could already guess what awaited you. Once inside, you were taken on unknown routes through mysterious doors. If anyone cried or made noise, they were mercilessly beaten by guards. The place they were taken to was filled with large, heavy steel doors, resembling a prison. According to survivors, each room held about 100 people, and the beds were arranged in bunk formations, just like in Squid Game. There were dozens of such rooms. Both the guards and prisoners wore identical clothing, striped blue pajamas. Upon arrival, the first thing done was to shave everyone's heads, leaving behind a strange tuft of hair. Names and identities had no place here. Everyone was assigned a number, and you were addressed solely by that number. You had no choice but to obey the guards. Disobedience led to severe torture, even for children as young as 5 years old. On the first day, alarms rang at 5 a.m., and everyone was lined up and removed from their rooms. The first shock people experienced was here. Believing they were alone, they were overwhelmed when they saw thousands of others, all dressed identically and marked with different numbers, gathered in an open area. They were in the middle of a massive structure they had never seen before. This area was filled with people of all ages in striped pajamas. It wasn't just children who were brought there. Escape was impossible. The area was surrounded by walls like a fortress, with guards stationed on every level. The only thing you could do was accept your fate. Another similarity to Squid Game was that the facility was on an island, just like the game's location in the series. However, unlike the series, this place had factories, churches, hospitals, and schools. resembling more of a city. But while these structures existed, the people couldn't use them. To illustrate the conditions, one toothbrush was shared by 4 individuals, and people were given only one outfit per year. In Squid Game, at least a semblance of democracy existed. Participants could vote to leave the game if they didn't want to continue. But here, democracy was non-existent. For your entire life, you had to obey commands or face torture and death. The sole purpose of being there was to work like a slave in the factories. Remember Young, whose story we mentioned at the beginning of the video? Young was brought to this camp and assigned to work in a fishing gear factory. The people there were given very little food, and tragically, they were often forced to eat rats found in the toilets just to survive. The authorities were so ruthless that if a woman became pregnant, they injected her with drugs to induce a miscarriage. The treatment of disabled individuals was even more horrific. They were locked in a room, given unknown substances, and turned into zombie-like beings. These areas, where the disabled were kept, were chillingly referred to as the zombie zones. After 2 years, Jung was now 14 years old. Many people around him had died, and new ones had arrived to take their place. One day, he saw a face that looked very familiar. It was his father. According to Jung, after he disappeared, his father had turned to alcohol and continued searching for his son. He had gone to every police station he could find, but the police always claimed they couldn't do anything. Eventually, the police made a decision. Jung's father was also deemed eligible to be sent to Brothers' home. He was labeled as unsuitable for society. The authorities had not only abducted his son, but also declared him unfit and brought him to the camp. The people living in the camp were regularly manipulated into believing they were living in prosperity. They were taken to church services where they were told how lucky they were to be living there and encouraged to pray to God in gratitude. They were made to believe that God had blessed them with this place and that they were privileged and special. By 1986, prosecutor Mr. Kim went hunting on an island in the forest with his colleagues. While hunting, he noticed these people from a distance and couldn't believe what he was seeing. It was as if he were witnessing a slave camp from 1,000 years ago. He immediately began investigating the area. Mr. Kim was baffled by the sight of nearly 900 people working in such conditions. However, he had only seen those who were being forced to work outside. As he continued his research and observations of the area, he discovered that the actual number of people living there exceeded 3,000. Why was this place created? How could such a place exist? And why did no one know about it? Let's explore the answers. Brothers' Home was a rehabilitation center established within the framework of South Korea's government policies in the 1980s. Yes, the camp was named Brothers' Home. At that time, the country was seen as an economy rapidly modernizing and aligning with the West in the eyes of the world. However, this economic growth exacerbated social inequalities. As cities expanded, street children, the homeless, and marginalized groups became more visible. The government decided to remove these individuals from the streets to ensure the big cities appeared clean. Officially, the purpose of these places was to rehabilitate society and turn individuals into productive citizens. In reality, however, these centers were part of a modern slavery system, with Brothers' Home being the largest and most horrifying example. Brothers' Home was managed by a pastor named Lee Jong-rak. Initially, Lee was known as someone who aimed to support the needy in society. Religious leaders in South Korea were generally trusted figures in the community, and Lee leveraged this trust to establish Brothers' Home. Over time, however, Lee Jong-rak's true nature began to surface. Brothers' Home turned into a prison where people were exploited under horrifying conditions. Far from being a shelter for help, Pastor Lee misused government funds, amassing a large fortune. The system running the facility was entirely profit-driven, with the rights of those living there completely ignored. To the outside world, Brothers' Home was presented as a model rehabilitation center. Both the government and Lee Jong-rak claimed it operated to reintegrate individuals into society. The media played a significant role in promoting this narrative. Lee Jong-rak was portrayed as a benevolent leader, and officials visiting the center referred to it as a success story. The South Korean government funded places like Brothers' Home and claimed these centers addressed social issues. As a result, to the outside world, Brothers' Home appeared to be a social responsibility project. The dark story of Brothers' Home is not just a tragedy of a particular era, but also an example of how fiction can be inspired by reality. Squid Game vividly portrays systems that exploit society's most vulnerable, likely drawing deep inspiration from events like those at Brothers' Home. Just as the characters in the series were forced into games out of desperation and debt, the people at Brothers' Home were trapped in a cruel system with no way out. Though experienced in different periods and forms, the common thread between Squid Game and Brothers' Home is their stark depiction of the darkest aspects of human nature and the horrifying consequences of social inequality. However, while one is a fictional story, the other is a harsh reality. Knowing this story offers an opportunity to learn from the past and work towards a future that is more just and and respectful of human rights. Watching Squid Game, we might view it as a piece of entertainment, but such tragedies have devastated lives in the real world. And what about us? Should we dismiss the critiques in Squid Game as mere fiction, or should we confront the realities behind these stories? Thank you for watching. If you'd like to see more videos like this, don't forget to follow us. Let us know in the comments what topic you'd like us to explore in our next video.